For 20 years, my life was a masterpiece painted by other people. Every brush stroke was perfect, every color chosen for its respectability. I had the prestigious academic career, the ambitious husband, the immaculate home in a desirable zip code. But if you looked closely, you'd see the cracks in the canvas. You'd feel the blinding throb of the migraine that started behind my right eye every time I sat down at my desk. It was the pain of a soul screaming in a soundproof room, a life so perfectly constructed that it left no space for the person living it.
That feeling of being trapped in a life you meticulously built is something so many of us know. Today, we're hearing the powerful story of Isabelle Dubois from Washington, D.C., a woman who dared to tear down her own beautiful prison. I'm Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we celebrate the courage it takes to rewrite your own story. Welcome, Isabelle.
My world was one of quiet intellectual order. My days were a rhythm of grant proposals, peer reviews, and university committee meetings. I was Dr. Dubois, an expert in 18th century European political theory. My name was on publications that gathered dust on university library shelves, a testament to a sharp mind that followed all the rules. My home was a reflection of my life. Minimalist, elegant, every book alphabetized, every surface gleaming. My husband, David, was a partner at a powerful law firm, a man who moved through the world with an unshakable certainty that I both admired and resented. Our life together was a well-oiled machine of dinner parties with his colleagues and academic conferences for me. We were a power couple, a portrait of success. On paper, it was everything a woman like me, from a family of academics, was supposed to want. I was praised for my discipline, my intellect, my ability to manage a demanding career and a sophisticated household. No one ever asked if I was happy. And the truth is, for a very long time, I never dared to ask myself. Happiness felt like a frivolous, indulgent concept, a luxury I hadn't earned. Security and respect, those were the currencies that mattered. But beneath the calm surface, I was carrying an incredible weight. It was the weight of expectation. My parents, my husbands, my professions. I was the supporting character in everyone else's story. I was the intelligent, capable wife who hosted flawless dinners to advance her husband's career. I was the dutiful daughter who pursued a sensible doctorate instead of a frivolous arts degree. Every choice felt like a concession. The weight manifested as a constant low-grade anxiety, a feeling of being a meticulously crafted forgery. And then there were the migraines. They weren't just headaches. They were a system shutdown. A blinding, nauseating curtain would fall, forcing me into a dark, silent room for hours, sometimes days. Doctors prescribed medications, but I knew deep down they were the physical evidence of an unlived life. They were my body's final, desperate attempt to get my attention. A rebellion my conscious mind was too afraid to stage. The whispers started quietly. They'd come in the still moments. I'd be in a faculty meeting, listening to a debate on tenure-track policies, and my mind would drift. I'd find myself staring out the window at a bird on a wire, and a question would bubble up from nowhere. Is this all there is? I started secretly buying poetry books, hiding them between dense historical texts on my nightstand. Reading them felt like an illicit affair, a taste of a language that was about feeling, not just thinking. Sometimes, late at night, I would open a blank document on my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wouldn't write anything, but just for a moment, I would let myself imagine. I'd imagine characters, stories, worlds that had nothing to do with geopolitical theory. It was a secret garden I visited in my mind, a place where the air wasn't so thin. These moments were fleeting, and I always pushed them away, labeling them as foolish fantasies, the silly daydreams of an overstressed academic. But the whispers were persistent, a quiet, constant hum beneath the noise of my very sensible life.
The event that turned the whispers into a roar was an email from my old college roommate, Anya. Anya was the opposite of me in every way. While I was in the library, she was in the art studio, covered in clay and paint, gloriously messy and unapologetically passionate. She had spent the last 2 decades as a quote-unquote struggling artist. My family would sometimes mention her with a kind of pity. Such a shame she never did anything practical with her talent, my father would say. The email was an invitation to her first major solo exhibition at a prestigious gallery downtown. When I walked into the gallery, the air buzzed with energy, and there was Anya's work. It was breathtaking. Bold, chaotic, deeply emotional sculptures that felt more real and alive than anything in my life. People were crowded around them, talking, debating, feeling. And in the center of it all was Anya, her face glowing, not with the polish of success, but with the raw, undeniable joy of creation. I hugged her, told her how proud I was, and my voice sounded hollow even to me. I smiled for photos, sipped my champagne, and felt like a ghost. The contrast between us was a physical blow. She had chosen a life of uncertainty, of passion, of financial instability, and she was luminous. I had chosen security, prestige, and predictability, and I felt utterly, completely empty. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred through my tears. For the first time, I didn't see Anya's life as a cautionary tale. I saw it as a life lived in full color, while mine was in grayscale. My mind's immediate reaction was to build a fortress. I went into overdrive, burying myself in my work. I told myself Anya was the exception, not the rule. For every artist who gets a gallery show, thousands fail. I had a pension. I had health insurance. I had respect. I recited these facts to myself like a mantra. David was dismissive of Anya's success. "Good for her," he said, without looking up from his legal briefs. "I'm sure the gallery will take half and shall be broke again in 6 months." His pragmatism felt like a lifeline, and I clung to it. But the fear was a cold knot in my stomach. What would happen if I even admitted what I wanted? The judgment from my family would be immense. The disappointment. They would see it as a betrayal of my potential, a waste of an expensive education. And David, our entire life, our social standing was built on our 2 impressive careers. Me wanting to, write stories? It was absurd. It was juvenile. The thought of saying it out loud filled me with a paralyzing terror. I was afraid of losing everything I had, but even more than that, I was afraid of failing. What if I tried and discovered I had no talent? Then I would have given up a life of respectable success for a life of embarrassing mediocrity. It was easier, safer, to just stay put in my beautiful, quiet cage. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic explosion, but with a terrifying silence. I had just finished a massive, year-long research project. It was the culmination of thousands of hours of work, and it was being lauded by my department.
I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt nothing. I walked into my home office that evening. The last rays of sun were hitting the spines of my perfectly organized books. My diplomas hung on the wall in elegant frames. Everything was exactly as it should be. I sat down in my expensive ergonomic chair and stared at the computer screen, at the final submitted manuscript. And I felt a void so profound, it scared me. It was like I was looking at the life of a stranger, a very accomplished, very tidy stranger. But it wasn't me. The carefully constructed facade of Dr. Isabelle Dubois crumbled, and all that was left was this hollow shell. The migraine that had been threatening all day finally crashed down, but this time it felt different. It felt like the last circuit in my brain was finally shutting off. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, in the dark, as the silence in the room became indistinguishable from the silence inside me. And in that silence, I heard one single clear thought. I cannot do this for one more day. The thought was terrifying, but it was also the first truly authentic thought I'd had in years. The decision that followed felt less like a choice and more like a survival instinct. It was like a drowning person finally breaking the surface of the water. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I looked up the university's policy on sabbaticals. It was a terrifying concrete step. I wasn't going to quit. Not yet. That was too big, too scary. But I would take a leave. A year. 1 year to see if there was anything else inside me besides footnotes and bibliographies. I knew telling David or my parents would invite a storm of criticism and concern trolling that would crush this fragile new resolve. So I made another decision. I would keep it a secret for as long as I could. I told my department I was taking a research sabbatical to work on a new book proposal, which wasn't entirely a lie. The only person I told the whole truth to was my sister. I needed one anchor in reality, one person to know that I wasn't having a breakdown. I was having a breakthrough.
My first act of rebellion was pathetically small, but it felt monumental. I enrolled in an online introductory creative writing course. I did it late one night after David was asleep, the house silent except for the clicking of my keyboard. Typing my credit card information into the registration form felt illicit, like I was buying contraband. A part of me was screaming, "What are you doing? This is a waste of time and money." But another, quieter part felt a thrill I hadn't experienced since I was a girl. The first class was a video lecture. I put on headphones, hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table, feeling like a teenage girl hiding a secret from her parents. The professor talked about character and plot and voice. It was a world away from the academic jargon I was used to. It was a world of what if. For the first time in 2 decades, I wrote something that wasn't for a grade or a publication. It was a short, clumsy paragraph about a woman sitting in a dark room. And as I wrote it, I felt a flicker of something I'd long forgotten. Joy.
Eventually, I had to tell David. His reaction was worse than I had feared. He wasn't angry, he was condescending, which was somehow more painful. He laughed it off. "A little writing hobby? That's cute, Belle. Good for you. Just don't let it distract you from the real work when you go back." He never called it writing. It was always my little project or my hobby. Every question was laced with skepticism. "Are you sure you want to spend your time on that? When are you going back to your real job?" The pressure was subtle but constant, 1,000 tiny cuts to my confidence. My parents were equally dismissive, though they cloaked it in academic snobbery. "Fiction is fine, I suppose," my father said over the phone, But you have a brilliant mind for analysis, Isabelle. It seems a shame to waste it on storytelling. Their words echoed in my head, feeding the seeds of doubt that were already there. Every time I sat down to write, I felt the weight of their judgment. I felt foolish, self-indulgent. I was an imposter, playing dress-up as a writer. The world I had known, the world that had always praised me for being smart and sensible, was now actively resisting this change, trying to pull me back into the neat, respectable box I had just begun to escape. The external resistance was nothing compared to the war raging inside me. The blank page was a terrifying mirror, reflecting all my insecurities. Some days, the words would flow and I'd feel a giddy sense of hope. But most days, I was paralyzed by self-doubt. David's voice, my father's voice, they became my own internal critics, whispering that I was a fraud, that my writing was clumsy and amateurish. I would read a beautifully written novel and feel despair, thinking, I can never do that. I missed the easy validation of my old life. I missed knowing the rules. In academia, there was a clear path. Here, in this world of creativity, there was no map, no rubric. I was completely lost. The loneliness was staggering. I felt caught between two worlds, no longer fully a part of my old one, and not yet belonging to the new one. The temptation to retreat, to call my department head and say I'm coming back, was immense. The familiar pain of that life felt safer than the terrifying uncertainty of this one.
After months of work, I finished a draft of a novel. With trembling hands, I sent out query letters to a handful of literary agents. I knew to expect rejection, but I wasn't prepared for the reality of it. The first one arrived in my inbox a few weeks later. It wasn't a standard form letter. This agent had taken the time to write a few sentences of feedback. They read, "While the premise is interesting, the prose is academic, and the voice is unremarkable." Unremarkable. The word hit me like a physical punch. It was my worst fear, condensed into a single adjective. It confirmed every doubt I'd ever had. It was proof that David and my family were right. I was a fraud. I stared at the email for what felt like hours, the word unremarkable burning into my screen. That night, I closed my laptop, shoved my manuscript in a drawer, and felt something inside me just break. The hope that had sustained me was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy despair. This was it. The experiment had failed. I was on the verge of deleting every file, throwing away every note, and crawling back to the safety of my old life. I spent a few days in a fog, not writing, barely speaking. One afternoon, just to get out of the house, I went for a walk and ran into my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, tending her roses. She was a retired librarian, a woman with kind eyes and hands permanently dusted with soil. She asked how my sabbatical project was going. I think my face must have crumbled, because her expression softened. I mumbled something about it not working out, about a rejection. She paused, snipped a stray leaf from a rosebush, and looked at me. "When I was a young woman," she said, her voice quiet, "I wanted to be a painter. But my father told me it was no way to make a living, so I became a librarian. A fine life, but some nights I still dream in color." She met my eyes. "Don't let one person's definition of remarkable be the end of your story, dear. The most remarkable thing is that you're writing it at all." It wasn't a grand speech, but her words and the lifetime of regret I saw in her eyes broke through my despair. It was a lifeline.
Mrs. Gable's words changed something fundamental in me. My goal shifted. It was no longer about getting published. It was about honoring that dream she had given up. It was about writing the story. I took a deep breath and did something that terrified me. I joined a local writers group that met in the back of a bookstore. Walking in that first night, my heart was pounding. But as I listened to others share their work, their struggles, their hopes, I realized I wasn't alone in this. I shared a chapter of my unremarkable novel, and instead of criticism, I got constructive feedback. I got encouragement. For the first time, I was in a room with people who understood. I started rewriting, not for some faceless agent, but for myself and for my new community. I learned to set boundaries. When David made a dismissive comment, I'd calmly say, "This is important to me." I wasn't fighting him anymore. I was simply stating my truth. Slowly, painfully, one sentence at a time, I was climbing back.
Months later, I finished the novel. Again. But this time it was different. The voice was stronger, clearer. It was mine. The act of typing the end was the real victory. What happened next felt like a postscript. I sent it out again, and this time it found a home. An agent loved it. An editor wanted to publish it. But by then, the external validation, while wonderful, wasn't the point. The real change had already happened inside me. I was no longer Dr. Dubois who secretly wanted to write. I was a writer. I walked differently. I spoke differently. The constant hum of anxiety was replaced by a quiet confidence. And the migraines? They still came, occasionally, but they were faint echoes of what they used to be. They had less to scream about.
Sometimes I think about that woman, the one sitting in her perfect office with a blinding migraine, trapped in a life that didn't fit. I want to reach back and tell her, it's okay to want more. That ache you feel isn't a flaw, it's a compass. The script for your life isn't written by anyone else, and it's never too late to pick up the pen. Your story is not unremarkable. You just haven't written it yet. Dare to write it.
Thank you, Isabelle, for that incredible journey of courage and creation. The most remarkable thing is that you're writing it at all. What powerful words. If Isabelle's story resonated with you, let us know in the comments below. Your story matters too. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of transformation. And click here to watch another of our inspiring journeys. Until next time, be brave.